Okay, so I got the green light. So thank you all for coming out, for attending. Definitely want to also just give a shout out and respect to all the filmmakers, actors, actresses who really poured themselves into these following films. I just want to give a second just to give you all your flowers. I had a wonderful opportunity to watch all these films back to back today, and was just very, very pleased, very entertained, very inspired by what you all have been able to come up with and accomplish. So just want to thank you all for your incredible work, and thank you all for being here with us. So I would love to just sort of jump right in here, and I would love to hear from as many folks who feel comfortable, but especially the filmmakers themselves, with a few general questions. And the first question I have is, were there any other works that sort of inspired you all to do the films that you did? And if those, who those would be, and why or how they inspired your work?
I can jump in if you'd like.
Please.
So when we were initially brought onto this project, it was to create a video for the Black Nativity group to celebrate their 50th anniversary, which we were super honored to work with them on. And when we started to do research on who they were, we started to learn more about Elma Lewis and the National Center for Afro-American Artists. And in that process, we watched a lot of really cool archival films about Elma and the school and Black Nativity. And watching those archival films really started to inspire us in many ways. And knowing that we wanted to create something so people could support Black Nativity, but also keep Elma Lewis alive, was really the catalyst for us to make this short film.
That's awesome. Yeah, and this sort of bleeds into my next question. So you all can answer both of these at the same time, which was sort of why tell this story and why now? But if anyone else want to sort of take a stab at this as well.
Well, I know for the first question, to answer the first question, hello, my name is Tiesha, DP for Roxbury Love Story. One of the elements in Roxbury Love Story that we incorporated was the black and white scenes. And then we gradually turned it into color. And then we also emphasized only having her red dress as colored in the black and white scenes. A film that inspired me to do that was She's Gotta Have It by Spike Lee. And it was a part in the film where there was like a dancing scene and it turned into black and white. And I'm a huge fan of Spike Lee. So finding ways to kind of incorporate some of his inspiration into films that I get opportunities to capture really makes me happy, yeah.
Awesome, awesome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Exodia. I am one of the directors for Roxbury Love Story. And to kind of tackle the question of why now, when Kai and Chris had first approached us about creating this film, we were, working with the timeline of like the mural being unveiled in Boston, and also having a space where we could look at the artwork associated with that. And one of the things that always struck me about, the timing of it was the question of like, how many people are aware or not aware of this story? And why is that? We have these major cultural figures in our, history that met in Roxbury. And if you're walking down Mass Ave, you're touching at least 3 or 4 historical points that are connected to the story. And the awareness was a very, important and critical aspect of just being able to, execute this project with a sense of urgency and understanding that, there is no time like the present, but honoring our past and being able to be, fortified by these stories is really important as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Absolutely.
Yeah, to speak on Eight Wheels specifically, I was the cinematographer and editor. Drew Powell over here was our director. We actually met, it was our first semester back from COVID. We both went to BU. And so we met at our first semester back, and he pitched this film at the beginning of our semester. And I hopped on the project because I loved it was at the intersection of talking about COVID, but also talking about issues of whitewashing and stuff like that. And so I think it really was a culmination of a lot of the things that were coming up again and again, especially in the past year. And so I think also we were hoping it was a way to also help Eight Wheels help Chez, Vous, help their fundraiser and kind of hope that it would spread some awareness and kind of help their cause as well and help them stay open. So I think that was what was motivating me, especially, is that we were hoping that it would directly impact that business and help them stay afloat.
I also, to speak on the idea of how many people are unaware, I remember distinctly kind of the beginning of March when everything started to shut down and everyone was kind of looking for hobbies to do. Roller skating had become this really big hobby, specifically on Instagram or on TikTok and other social media platforms. And it was odd at that time to think that roller skating was this brand new thing. And so when class time came around and we were instructed to think about documentary topics we wanted to cover, I kind of started off wanting to know about the history of roller skating specifically, which then evolved into learning about Chez, Vous, which then evolved into learning okay, I've been living in Boston for 4 years and I didn't know that we were home to one of the few Black-owned roller rinks in the entire US, and there had been this entire history and culture that was there and still is there that we kind of just had never encountered up until the pandemic, and that desire to know where it all started in the first place.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I could add a little bit here about my movie, Together 6 Feet Apart, which I directed. And it really, a little bit of a story. It evolved from a group of performing artists from Boston the group's called BeHeard.World, and they're largely from Mattapan, Dorchester, Roxbury, East Boston, Chelsea, and they've been touring, and they take on social justice issues. And they did a tour from Mississippi to Chicago up the Great Black Migration Trail. And I'm making a full-length documentary about that. And we just got very close, really almost family-like through all that experience. It was a very intense experience, because they were, I think, discovering a lot about America's racial history. We all were, that, was not very evident from what was being taught in the Boston public schools and other schools up here. And so it was just a very inspiring trip. They did an amazing job and great work. And anyway, the process of making that film, along came COVID, and we were just together talking about all that stuff. And they said, hey, what can we do during COVID as a group to keep the discussions going that are important to us? So we came up with this idea of Together 6 Feet Apart, to kind of carry out the same theme. So we shot the whole thing over 2 days on the basketball court at the Brownlee Heath housing development, 2 awfully damn hot days in July of last year. But I think their work speaks for itself. I think they're just a magnificent group of artists, and it was an honor to be able to put that together for them and for us.
Yeah, absolutely. You touch on this process, and I think that kind of leads me to my next question. Again, for open to everyone, because this is very much a general question, just in terms of what was the process like making your films, and how did COVID affect that, and to talk about maybe the pluses and the minuses, the challenges and the opportunities that sort of this pandemic brought to you all as creators.
Hi everyone, I'm Kiara again, and I think with Roxbury Love Story specifically, we're talking about two major world leaders. We're talking about Martin Luther King Jr. and we're talking about Coretta Scott King. And I think that it was really hard for us to think about how do we tell this fantastic story about two people who touched so many people in the world, who traveled to so many different places, who, congregated so many people, but, and have such a tight cast because we're in the smack dab middle of COVID-19. One of the things that our cast did do along with our production team is just kind of come together during COVID, whether it be via Zoom, whether it be a phone call or just spaced out in a room together. And we did a lot of research. We also walked the city to go to these different landmarks in which they shared these, moments together. And that was I think, very important for us in our process to just have that intimate moment, especially for me, someone who is a native of Dallas, Texas, to be living here for 9 years and to just have learned of this love that was conceived and, kind of came together here in Roxbury, Massachusetts was kind of mind blowing. I would think it's something that you would learn immediately. I think, something that the city would be extremely, extremely proud of. So, for us to have to do so much research and dig into that, I think it really just brought our cast tighter, but it also made our process more of a personal journey, and also reconnecting with not just their love story, but also tapping into the essence of what that love can do for not only a community, but really just the world at large.
Yes, I had a specific question around that, but I'll get to that later. I want to just make sure that everyone else has an opportunity, but I will get back to that because that's a very important point. Anyone else, just about the process or about maybe just how the pandemic affected that process?
I know for Eight Wheels, it was kind of a different process just because we were going through our university in a way. So when we were sort of kind of beholden to whatever they told us we had to do. So we weren't allowed to have more than 3 people in our crew. So it was Drew and me, and Adrian was our sound designer and did a lot of the cinematography as well. And I think that was an interesting experience. Just having 3 people on set at all times is the minimum possible you could ever to make anything. But it was a learning experience. And halfway through the semester, they put in more regulations that basically we couldn't, if anyone was on screen, they had to also wear a mask, which for sound purposes made it more difficult. And we were just kind of dodging through these regulations, trying to get this done. But I think I don't know, it taught us a lot. I mean, it definitely put us through the ringer a little bit, but I think that it was a really enjoyably challenging experience. I mean, with 3 of us, it was just we all had such a big hand in the project. And yeah, Drew did an amazing job of managing all of these regulations and challenges. So yeah.
I think I could add on to that. When you go into a short film or any type of storytelling, it's a really collaborative process. And similar to Ryan, a crew, we would approach a project and have maybe 10, 12, 15, 20 people on that project. But really, due to the pandemic, we had to just become very small and, like Ryan, have a very, very small crew. But the beauty of that was that, you know, you were working muscles that you hadn't worked in a while, which was really great. And there were so many learning opportunities layered in the complexities. And also too, working with the Black Nativity group and being able to shoot with them and keep them safe and having the distance, you had to think in a completely different way, which was really challenging, but also really cool. And, you know, Dan Lewis is here, the director of photography of Black Nativity. And I don't know if you want to add anything, Dan, but it really challenged us in really great ways. And in the editing process, it was just literally just Dan and I in an edit suite sitting 6 feet apart as much as we could get, masks up, trying to create in a really challenging time. But it was rewarding in so many ways.
Yeah, it was definitely a learning experience. It was definitely I kind of enjoyed the small crew aspect of it. It's really very streamlined. Oh, I'm Dan, by the way. I came kind of late. It's very streamlined, and it kind of brought new efficiency to working on, you know, a project where, like, okay, there's 6 people here, and we all have to be on the same accord, or nothing happens, you know. So yeah, I think it was very rewarding.
Just to add to, you know, some of what Dan and Karen said, I feel as though that restriction and limitation ignited a lot of creativity for our process. And, you know, for us specifically, Roxbury Love Story is an intimate story. And due to the pandemic, it evolved as an intimate process, you know, even just with the limiting of the cast and how we were going through, you know, either figuring out locations, figuring out, you know, so many people were supportive of this project and wanting to be, you know, contributors and collaborators. And just, it really forced us to figure out how do we safely execute and, you know, receive that kind of like generosity from our community as we're developing this project. So yeah, the pandemic definitely was a challenge, but it helped us draw out some of those elements that I don't know if we would have done it the same way had it not been in this situation.
Sure. Yeah. I want to take a real quick pivot, just because I see that we have Derick with us, and I think it would be interesting just to hear your perspective as being a subject of, you know, of this work, and kind of what your role was and how that experience was for you.
Well, for me, it was quite different because, well, can everyone hear me well? Because I was having some trouble connecting. Okay, great.
Sound great. Yep.
Well, to give some background, my name is Derick Foster-Toney. If you saw the film, I am one of the managers and, you know, co-owners with my family of Chez roller skating rink in Dorchester. For me, the process was a little different because, of course, you know, it was such a tough time with the pandemic, and roller skating rinks take a bigger hit than everyone else, and they don't realize it because we're really based on the families and the support of the community and the continuous support. So we were kind of in the middle of a funk where it was just such uncertain times and so many different things we had to pivot through just to get to a point where we could even invite this project in. So it was a great project, and I appreciate being a part of it because it gave a chance for us to be able to tell our own voices through our own lens about what skating is. Because as you know, right now, what's going through this whole media, hey, skating is coming back, and skating is just now being a popular thing as if it just crawled under a rock, and it's not the case. So, you know, it was a good thing that this landed on my lap to be able to say, hey, no, skating is culture. Skating has been in this community. It has built this community. And it's one of the big reasons why this community has been able to stay together in such a way where we all know each other and we all have a familiarity because of skating and skating rinks like ours. So, you know, it's been a struggle, and this pandemic has still been affecting us to this day. But, you know, this project has definitely been a blessing to be able to express a little bit of our side of things.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I kind of want to also pose the same question to Kai. Kai, I know you were a producer, but you know, Roxbury is really your home, and it's a place that you've really championed. So I think, like Derick, you know, you're somewhat the subject in sort of a extended way of Roxbury. And so I'd love to just to hear your thoughts about what the documentary meant for you and what it means for the space.
Well, thank you, Daniel. And first of all, I got to shout out Chez. I don't know one person in my clique, my circle, that ain't never been to Chez. I kept my name off the wall. I still have my button that says keep your name off the wall when Bruce Wall did that campaign. I grew up skating all throughout the city, whether it's Chez or spinoff. So thank you to the Toney family. Thank you to all the other filmmakers and producers. You know, what's interesting, Daniel, to me is this iteration of Roxbury. We are going through a very, very gentrified time in our community where a lot of the native Roxburyans are being displaced. And so for Roxbury Love Story, to be inspired by the story of Coretta and Martin when they were young and met basically on the corner of Melnia Cass Boulevard and Shawmut Avenue at the second iteration of the 12th Baptist Church, which no longer is there. It's a hotel now. And so Black Market was commissioned by the developer of that hotel to help create a mural installation. We tapped Pro Black, who grew up right across the street in Lenox Projects, and Gio Ortega to do that part of the creative work. But what I loved most, I think, about making sure that this story was held and told, it was told by young Black gifted creatives. You had Moonlight Production, you had Tiesha, you had the majority of folks that helped to bring this to life, that were not just melanated, but they were also female or identified as femme. And so what you have here is a culmination of not just COVID-19, but we were in the middle of a racial reckoning that basically informed and led the process in regards to its energy. And so 2020 for us was so much, I mean, kinetic and explosive, so much energy that it kind of made us come back to a sense of loving ourselves, loving our community, loving each other. And what better way to tell that through dance, cinematography, photography, musical art, and visual art. And so for us, Roxbury lives on through projects like the Roxbury Love Story, and we're just proud to be a part of the Roxbury International Film Fest.
Awesome. Yes. Awesome. Yeah, for sure. I would love to bounce this over to Jay, because I think one thing I'd like to hear from you. One thing that Kai just brought up was just the racial reckoning that happened this year. Obviously, it was not isolated. This has been an ongoing issue for ever since this country was created. But the way that it came together this past year was very historic. And the thrust of the piece that you directed was already in that vein. I'm just wondering, was it a response to that? Was it sort of a continuation of the work that they've been doing? And how did the reckoning accelerate or change the creative process of that film?
Yeah, it was a continuation. And this group of artists were, I think, very committed to that for a while, and have been. I think, I think the experience, when you have 9 dancers who are really stuck because COVID has, limited what they can do so much, and spoken word artists too, they were not sure, we were not sure what we could achieve. Especially, I think for them, it was can we reach out in some other way? We're used to being in front of live audiences. So and we weren't sure it would work because, it's not really just a performance and it's not really just a film. It's this sort of hybrid of all that. But the film has been used by all of us to engage different kinds of groups and conversations, from school children to faith groups to corporate groups to, I mean, the whole thing. And so I think if I can speak for the group, I would say that the group feels even more coalesced around, carrying this flag, and I think felt really good about being able to do something positive during a time when it was really hard to do that, and in the areas that they normally do it. So that was big, and I was just really honored to be able to be asked to direct it, and as somebody said earlier, films are not made by one person. I mean, it is really a major team effort, and I think that, including having to go find the money, to make it. So, having 15 people, plus there were 3 or 4 shooters, who, we all kind of said, I don't know where we're going to get the money, but we're just committed to doing it. And, we pieced a little bit together here and a little there and borrowed from here and borrowed from there, and, and slowly got out of debt on it. But it mattered, so that, that was the driving force. And yeah, so I think people are feeling good that we could come out of that very tough COVID time and produce something that still has impact, actually.
Yes, and I wanted to sort of or connect the dots between, is it Kiara? I want to say your name correctly. And I think you're muted. You are still muted, but oh, there you go. Kiara, okay. No worries. What you said earlier about the love, and how that love is so important. And I would love to sort of hear from you, but also everyone else, because it's really kind of, this was a continual theme I saw throughout all of the pieces, was that this sort of interpersonal love, whether that be a love of sort of an activity, like, or that be a love of between two couples, or between a couple and a love, sort of for spirituals, or for the Christian story, like Black Nativity. What is that love? Why is that love important? And how does that love expand to, I guess, realms of the political sphere, or realms of social justice? And how do all those things sort of link in your mind?
Well, I think for Roxbury Love Story, their love was so ethereal because what we wanted to portray is that it wasn't just about them as a unit, but also them in their own, whether it be social justice practice or art practice. With Coretta Scott King, we really wanted to portray her as someone who had a love for music, a love for her community. She was the choir director at 12th Baptist Church. Not only that, she created the songs for the marches and the movements for the civil rights movement, and these two impeccable people who had so much love for their community, it's not just this, romantic intimacy. It's this love that continues to grow and build off of this joint mission. That love is what is going to propel our people forward. Love is the only thing that is going to maybe help us see the light in this very dark place. And like Kaidi mentioned earlier, we were in a social justice reckoning, during that time. And I think it's very important to remind not only, Black couples and couples across the world, why it's important to unite and have this romanticized love, but why it's also important to love yourself and love what you do. You know, we don't see Coretta Scott following so much after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You know, we see her standing on her own 2 feet. We see her paving her own way, which actually just complements the work that he's already doing. And so I think that the love that we wanted to portray is that, you know, it's stronger as we stand side by side. And as we continue to grow that love for ourselves, for our community, for our work, for our practice, as a personal thing and an intimate thing with self and with community, but then only what's next is this beautiful love that can happen once everyone else kind of cultivate that love within themselves as well. So I think, well, from my perspective, and also just directing some of the scenes, especially for Coretta's role, I really wanted to portray the love that she had for her own practice, her own art practice, her own mission, and how that love, you know, intertwined magically and effortlessly with what Dr. Martin Luther King was set out to do in his mission.
For sure, for sure. I said this was for everybody, but I have a pointed question I wanted to ask Karen, just because there's also the story of Elma Lewis, who is another humongous leader in the community, and would love to just sort of get, I know you said that in the process of making your film, you got to hear a lot more stories about her, and would just love to hear you speak on what maybe you have learned about her and learned about maybe her tremendous effect on the neighborhood, which I think another story that a lot of people may not know.
The thing that, I grew up in Boston. My family has a business in Mattapan Square, grew up in Hyde Park, and never heard of Elma Lewis. That is crazy. Work at Emerson College, and I start to hear more about her and learn a little bit. And she was a student at Emerson College, and the Black Nativity group reaches out to us, and we're honoring their 50th anniversary of doing this amazing performance. The thing that I admire most about Elma Lewis was that she was so strong and so courageous and stood for her community and building confidence in children at a time in Boston when it wasn't that great. The thing that I love about the panel and what everybody brings to the table is how rich Boston is in history. And that richness comes from these beautiful communities of Boston, Roxbury, Dorchester, Hyde Park. It's so rich, and these stories need to be told. And I think that that's where Elma Lewis is an inspiration for us. I know she's an inspiration for my students, that she opened this school to build confidence in the community, built that confidence through art and expression, whether it would dance, painting, poetry. Filmmaking really wasn't a huge thing back in the 70s and 80s because it was so complicated, or the 60s for that matter too. So it's a story that I don't want to see go away. I think her legacy is through Black Nativity, but it's also so much broader than that. And I don't know if this is quirky or weird, but there's an admiration that doing this research and a love for her that has grown. And speaking with former students of Elma Lewis who went through the school, they look back at her, they mentioned that she was tough, but also the lessons that she gave them are priceless. And that's important. You know, stories like that, they can't go away, and we can't forget them. So I don't know if I got off track or whatever, but Elma Lewis, I do not want her to go away. And I want that story, I want us to build on this story. I want to see Black Nativity go on forever. I think it's an important performance on multiple levels. I want to see the National Center for Afro-American Arts continue. And those are the lessons that I've learned doing this project. And they're very important to me and to Boston, I feel. So, and I don't know if Dan, if you want to add on to that. Dan's a New Yorker, but he loves Boston now. So Dan, I don't know if you want to add on from your experience working on this project and understanding the history of Boston too.
I think, to be honest, you covered it. Honestly, being a New Yorker coming to Boston, you don't know beforehand how much Black history is here in Boston. It's not like a huge thing. So like working on this project, you hear this rich history and it's like, wow, I did not understand that, because it's not that long ago either. Like the 60s, the 70s, it's not that long ago that all this culture, came about. I don't know, just really fulfilling to kind of like be in the room with those people that were there and can, dispel that information.
Absolutely. We won't hold it against you, Dan, that you are a New Yorker. This is a safe space. I would love to hear from everyone. Oh, hold on. Exodia, do you have something you wanted to say?
A little thing.
Please.
You asked about, the intersection of like the love and the politics, specifically in this question. And one of the things, that was brought up by Karen and Dan and others is just the fact that, this history is Boston's history. The Black history of Boston is Boston's history. People do not know or understand or have the awareness of Boston as a multicultural, rich community where 1 in 4 people is a person of color. Kai brought up the gentrification of Roxbury, a historically Black neighborhood. Dorchester, Mattapan, all the contributions, Chez, Vous, what that has been like a monument, a staple in our community. Elma Lewis, all of these people, all of these stories are strategically hidden, and it's criminal. I'm somewhat passionate, very passionate, extremely passionate about this because, I grew up in Boston, grew up in Dorchester, went through schools, Boston Public Schools, and it took a long time for me to deal with the fact that we were living in this, curated invisibility. People that come to Boston, Black people that come to Boston, they're left to their own devices to try and find us at times. You know what I'm saying? You travel outside of Boston as a Black Bostonian, they're trying to figure out, did you mean Boston or Austin? No, Boston, Massachusetts. You feel me? And so when you talk about the love aspect, I think what came about in these stories, especially, is the fact that we have so much to love about ourselves. We have so much to love about our communities. We have so much to be inspired by. We have contributed so much. I'm sorry if I'm ranting a little bit.
Don't apologize. Don't apologize. This is great.
We have so much wealth that is just inherent in how we exist. And so when you talk about the love and the intersection of that and the politics, we're living in a time where if our communities, if our youth, if our children, if our elders, aren't unearthing it and bringing it to the forefront, then we would be in a very dire situation. You know what I'm saying? That love sustained us through the pandemic. That love continues to fortify us even after, to the point where we're dealing with a lot of challenges in our communities right now. A lot of challenges that have been exacerbated by the pandemic, but existed way before. And so when I think about the intersection of these stories and the love and the politics, it's like, we've never stopped fighting, but our storytelling is just one of these weapons in which we can continue to, blaze our trails forward and let the youth, let the children, let the elders, everyone know, Boston or not, that this is not new. This is not new, it's not going away, and it's entirely necessary for our continued development as a community, as a city, as a country, as a world. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was going to ask this. It's a perfect segue because it's like, why is it so important? And you hit on so many things. This is not just about making films to entertain. This is about life. This is about people's perception of self. This is about possibility. This is about justice. This is about the world that we want to live in. And what I would love to hear from everybody, I'm hoping we can get everybody. I know we have to close at 6:30, but I would love to hear from everyone about what was the goal that you had personally about this film that you contributed to, and however way you contributed to it. Like what was your reason for doing this, and what is the specific reason, or what is the specific outcome you were hoping that this film has on the audiences that have seen it, will see it?
I can start. I think like BU, or like being a student at BU, there's like a very white community at BU, specifically like the film community. And so oftentimes like subjects in those films very rarely depict the like multiculturalism of Boston. I would also say that like BU is in a place where you feel very segregated. So like I got to BU, that's okay, where are the Black people? Like how do I get there? Like especially like coming from the Bronx where I was like fully integrated, and then like moving to Boston, everything was kind of like so like spread out. And so in like deciding to do a documentary on Chez, I wanted people to feel seen, as well as like there to be an attention on like where the community was, so to speak, right? And so like being able to showcase the love that like many folks have spoken about, and like the community feeling of like these are all people that are together and like choose to remain together and choose to support each other and hold each other and make each other feel safe was really important to me. And so by like trying really hard to like integrate into that community and to get to know everyone that was involved in it, and really like talking to them and understanding like why they love Chez, or like how long have you been here and like why is this important to you, kind of is what we wanted to really focus on in terms of just like making sure that folks felt seen and that we all had a better understanding of like the strength of that community, as well as like where they were like in the first place, because I like didn't know originally.
Yeah, going off of that, I think for me in this project, I think it was like I said before, I think a lot of it was that I was hoping to recognize a moment where we could actually financially help Chez, if that would, whether it was $1 or whether it was hundreds of dollars, like whoever could potentially donate and just spread awareness of this incredible business and cultural monument. I think that was like the biggest payoff for me when I sort of got involved. I think the other thing too was that it was also a similar thing where going to BU, it was like the stories that people wanted to tell, I didn't feel like were necessarily relevant or interesting, or were necessarily like pushing any sort of boundaries or speaking for people who I felt like needed to have their voices heard. And I think this was a moment when I noticed that Drew just had the reins. Like I felt the passion. Drew had this idea. It was very clear that Drew had the vision the whole time. And I think that was a moment where I could sort of just support Drew in that endeavor. And it was a moment where I could help have a story be told, and making sure that I was sort of decentering myself in that, and still being able to find my pockets of being able to help Drew capture that. And so I think for me, that was the biggest payoff, is being able to help tell a really important story without like stepping on any toes and without putting myself in the middle of that. And I think that was something that was really important to learn for me.
Oh, all right. Well, for me, it was more so important for me to get across that our community is big and very valuable. Often we forget our value, often we're pushed aside, like was touched on before. You'd be so surprised and so shocked how much harder movements within our own community have to work to be seen, to be valued, to be taken seriously, to be treasured the way they're supposed to. I skate even outside of Boston. I've been to different states and I've been everywhere at this point. And you'd be surprised, when I introduce myself and say where I'm from, they look at me with this puzzled look and say, Black people live in Boston? And I'm saying to myself, what? It's like, are you kidding me? There's an entire big, huge community of culture. There's so much that goes on in Boston, but that's not what's put out there. And I also, through this project, wanted to remind everybody that we can't just keep sitting back waiting for pandemics and people to come forward and want to, put our voices out there. We have to do that work each and every day, and we have to work hard to keep that kind of momentum going for ourselves, because it's not always going to be an opportunity for that to happen. A lot of important places and things that used to exist in our own community don't exist anymore because we haven't fought for it hard enough. And that can easily happen to a Chez Vous, where it's cultured, and we've all, like it's been said millions of times, there hasn't been a lot of places that a child that's been growing up in Boston can say they've been to, and they, you'll always hear Chez Vous. I grew up growing up Chez Vous, I used to go to Chez Vous. We want to keep that momentum going through generations and generations. It shouldn't just stop with this idea that what we used to do isn't as big as what's going on now. Yes, it is, and we have to keep that mentality that the things that we want in our community, we have to fight for it, and to be honest, as I've been in Chez Vous my entire life, I'm 31 years old. And this is the first time the pandemic started. That's when the news articles started flowing in. That's when everyone wanted to interview me on these broadcasts. Like, I've been so busy with media, but this isn't the first time we've done important work. This isn't the first time we've done so many positive things within our community that deserve that praise, that recognition, that media touch, and that push, so that we can get to a point where people understand universally in our own community and everywhere that we're important. We are a beacon. We are definitely an institution that should never be non-existent, because places like ours structure our community, and it builds character with everybody that comes into play with it, that have associated with it, and that have spent their lives, spending their money, time, energy, and building that community. So, I'm glad I got a chance to, at least for what we were able to accomplish in the time and resources we had at the time, start that conversation, and hopefully that expands to many different, collaborations and a lot of awareness of where we're trying to go in the future.
I'm going to jump in right here too.
Please do. Please do.
My brother inspires me, Brother Derick. But, we're in a historic moment right now in the city of Boston. We have a Black and female mayor for the first time, and that's taken up the cover. It's kind of exposed a lot of the institutional and structural racism like never before. We have so many great forces and young creatives, young Black creatives that are taking up space, and rightfully so, because we haven't had that opportunity in the past, as other communities like Chinatown or the North End, they get to hold on and preserve their culture. But for us, it was always a tool where they would say, oh, this is divisive. Oh, when you have a moment of Black pride, it's always something that is tearing us apart. And that narrative is shifting, and we are no longer standing or going for the okie doke. We're in a place where, in 2020, when Black market couldn't open its doors and was ravaged because of COVID-19, we launched the Nubian Square Public Art Initiative, which really used art, murals, public arts, and expressive art as a tool and a weapon, to fight against systemic racism. We use it as a tool for healing, to heal ourselves, and to be able to see ourselves in the future of Roxbury and Black Boston. We are holding on to our stories. We're shifting narratives. we are the catalysts for our own salvation. And I think it's being led by artists. That's what I found in 2020, you know, artists who are DJs saved my life. The Versus show that Swiss Beats put out, D-Nice, you know, all of these, you know, audio kind of vibrations that we were able to take in addition to seeing all of the public art that was created. And that literally, you know, comes out of the type of social and, you know, socioeconomic justice that, you know, the Kings stood for, as both of them being artists themselves, you know, King out of BU and Coretta out of the conservatory. And so that brings us to where we are, in the fact that these younger folks are holding the baton and taking that on, you know, in the spirit of the Kings, in the spirit of Elma Lewis, in the spirit of these Roxbury giants. So very exciting moment, historic, and we need to keep moving towards artistic equity, racial equity, economic equity. We're not going to stop, or at least I know I'm not stopping.
Absolutely, absolutely. Please, if you haven't spoken, yes, please.
I just can't help think, what would Elma Lewis think if she were listening to this panel? And I think she'd be stoked. I think she would be like, I listened to this panel, I'm just like, I don't know. I think she would be so proud, because you're all through art. And Derick, can I say dance? Because when I watched the film, it was just this beautiful expression of dance and art and storytelling. I don't know. I just think this is how we get our stories out, and this is how we grow, and this is how we become stronger. And I think she would be thrilled. And I don't know. That's all. All just beautiful things were said. It's awesome.
Hi, if no one's jumping in. One additional element that I found in terms of like the goal and vision for these storytelling experiences was an innate sense of responsibility. And I know that might sound like really serious, but each and every single one of us has a responsibility to tell our stories. Through the Roxbury love story, I felt responsible for sharing that with the community, and also sharing that with each other, one another. Within Roxbury love story, finding my Roxbury love story, being able to say, you know, my voice and the voice of my peers, the voice of my community is my responsibility. I don't think anyone else can tell this story the way I can tell it. I don't think anyone else should tell the story if I can tell it, because it's mine. And so, you know, with the films that are represented today, these are our stories. You know, Chez is ours. Elma Lewis is ours. We are responsible for telling it the way that we know it. Our perspective, our influence on the narrative is very, very important. And so, you know, to answer your question, I think one of the goals that came out for me in this process is that I can't sleep. I can't play with that. I can't play with that, not even for a second, because let somebody else tell it. We only going to have one version of Boston that is the most profitable, that is the most palatable, so to speak. And so my responsibility is to tell the truth. My responsibility is to honor my history and to extend it to those coming behind me.
I think going off of that, that responsibility to tell the story. Oh, did I cut somebody off? Okay. Going off that, like, responsibility to tell the stories. What if nobody else told that story? You know, you can't leave stories untold. Is kind of like how I think. You know, so I think it's like it's our responsibility. We have to tell these stories because nobody else maybe nobody else will, you know? And with Black Nativity, it's like, what if nobody recorded that legacy? You know what I mean? That's kind of how I think of that story. What if nobody recorded that legacy? You know?
Yeah, just to piggyback off of Exodia and Dan, and even I have a shared kind of experience as Drew, you know, being an implant in the city of Boston. I've been living here for 10 years now. And the first 4 years of my experience living here, going to school in Back Bay, I had no idea that there was such Black history here in the city of Boston. I couldn't wait to get out of the city because I come from, you know, a predominantly Black neighborhood coming from Dallas. My doctors are Black, my teachers are Black. I feel seen where I came from. And it wasn't until I met Kaidi and Christopher Grant and was in Black Market and was in Nubian Square and was able to work for the mayor, Mayor Kim Janey, where I started to really open my eyes and realize, oh my gosh, there's so much Black history here. And not only that, I felt so much closer to the truth of the movement. Not just Dr. Martin Luther King and not just Coretta Scott King, but Malcolm X was here. You know, there's so many people walk these streets that, and I think it's just disheartening to know that these stories aren't being told. You know, nobody knows that this is the history of Roxbury. You know, this is the history of Boston. And I think it is a responsibility, not just to have grown up here, but I think responsibility that when you learn that truth, you know, and when you learn that gem, that it is your responsibility to share that truth and to use that to empower the next generations to come, to fight against gentrification, to fight against the pushing of Black people out of the city, because this is our home. This is our city. Roxbury is in the middle of Boston. It is the center focal point of Boston, and people need to know who walk these streets. And so that has been my why.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just in the interest of time, and I wanted to get to everybody, I would love, Jay, if you wouldn't mind saying a few words, and then we will end with you, Tiesha, because I don't think we've heard from you yet. And then we, unfortunately, will have to wrap this up.
Yeah, you know, I know it's a slippery slope for a white guy to be making a film about essentially Black viewpoints and Black stories. And when the artists came to me and asked me to do this, I thought a lot about that. And but you know, one of the things that that was very important to them and to me was we realized that this would be a story that would go to a lot of white audiences. And we had a lot of discussion about how uncomfortable we wanted to make people feel. And we decided we wanted to make people feel uncomfortable because that was, for a while, because that was part of what's sort of necessary to bring people around to, through that discomfort, you know, you get into some cognitive dissonance and then you can sort of, you know, go into a change process. So this film is not so much a Boston story. It's really about confronting racism, particularly with audiences that may have a long way to go on that or in the middle of the process, you know, on what is a long journey for most white people. And, you know, I've tried to be faithful to the group and, you know, it was very collaborative all along the way. Lots of discussions, lots of points of view about how we're going to take it, where we're going to do it. So I sort of feel, as I really wasn't kidding when I said earlier, I was very honored to be part of it and asked to do it, realizing that, you know, these are not my stories, but I'm going to do my best to try and help spoken word artists and dancers who have beautiful things to share and say, you know, straightforwardly, unapologetically, as they should be. And, you know, and that was my goal personally. And hopefully that's, you know, and I think they feel pretty good about it. So I feel okay about it too.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, is it Tiesha? I want to make sure I get your name right. Okay.
Tiesha, yeah.
All right.
So I think for me, the The most important thing for me, I mean, you guys already kind of said it, I'm sorry, but just to kind of reiterate, like, Boston just has so much history. And just when I thought I knew it all, just by being on board this project, I didn't even know half the things that we ended up shooting that Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott were involved in on a daily basis, right in my neighborhood that I grew up in. So to be able to contribute and be a part of something that's, you know, it's like an untold story that just needs to be told. I was very grateful to be a part of. This was my first production with a beautiful cast and amazing team, Black Market. I cannot thank you guys enough for bringing me on board. But I just love capturing things that I know is historic and that I know has strong, just this strong history behind it. And I'm very rooted, especially with my culture and my history, and anything that's just for bettering everyone, but most importantly, my people. So that's how I'll end it there. And I want to thank Roxbury Film Festival for putting our film on board.
Yes, yes. I want to thank all of you all for the incredible work that you've done, that you've created, and I appreciate the approach that you have all taken to creating it. I feel like it comes from a very real, authentic place, and it shows in the work that you all have been able to create. So, thank you all again. I wish we had like another hour. There's like other questions that I have that we'll have to do this again or something. But thank you all. Have a wonderful evening, and look forward to seeing more of what you create.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you, Daniel. Great job.
Absolutely,
Thank
absolutely.
all of you. I thank you all so much. You have created these incredible stories for us to be able to showcase. So we will continue this conversation. Thank you.
All right, y'all.